So in this video, I'm going to be drawing a rose, an orange rose with an unhatched rose right next to it. I don't know how to say it. It's an ungrown, unhatched rose it's going to be. But one thing about roses is, so they are actually big stacks of concentric leaves. So let me get to it. So what you need to keep in mind is, first you need to make concentric circles that slowly go kind of out of the main line. First start with the circles that you have for the rose itself. It can be, depending on what shape it would have in your mind, a little bit more wobbly, but overall it's going to be an asymmetric set of rings that are in each other and that are going to be the main guidelines. Now these guidelines are all going to be getting destroyed by the end when we have our rose drawn. So this is just a guideline. This is what it actually functions. So like this. Roses have petals that have color gradients that are usually darker on the edges, and since they are concentric and spherical and stacked inside, they are also very prone to being having shadow effects, which is going to make it more beautiful while making it a little harder to draw. So this is going to be the main body of the rose that we are going to have. Now we are going to show how much it is going to have the depth. So let's say the depth of the outer layer is going to be like this. See, it's slowly fleshing out. This is going to be the depth of the outer petals, inner petals, inner petals, and slowly getting inside. So it is going to be like this, and then it's going to be like this. Let's say like this, like this. It gets more bulbous as you get to the inside, and like this. So now what we are going to do is we are going to be giving the small unhatched petal later, the small unhatched rose later. We are going to be drawing that. Now we are going to be giving the actual rose texture. So roses have petals that are modified leaves, which means basically that each of these start life as a normal leaf, pretty much like a normal leaf, but they are specialized to attract different kind of insects, and so they have the colors that we love. Now slowly removing the guidelines from the actual shape of the flower. You see it's getting more of a shape now that looks more like the flower we know and love. So here I am drawing like this, and here I'm going to be giving it a sharp turn for the inside, just to make it more prominent, because it is a concentric petal, and if you don't make it, it's just going to be nothing but circles in other circles, and that's not something that we want. Starting from the outside gives me some freedom in how to draw this, and gives me some peace of mind in how to make this. So here, for example, I'm going to be giving it another petal. It's going to be looking like this, so small folds, imperfect, but still following the guideline pretty much to a T. And it's looking increasingly like the flower itself because of the effects that we are giving it. So what we are going to be doing here is kind of a cheat code, which is going to be, we are going to be connecting this part to the inside deleting that guideline, making it go like this, and still having that guideline, but very faintly so, because it is going to be relevant later. So what we are going to do is we are taking that out, and we are going to be connecting this all the way down and having one unbroken spherically sprawling petal. And look how beautiful it is starting to look. Now I'm giving it some stripes for the petal folds like this, so that it gets even more realistic. I'm keeping the fuzzy outline because that's going to be the areas where I'm going to be using a darker color, a darker shade. So here, let's say we are going to do a petal that is more folded outside. This is one of the most challenging flowers, but the most beautiful to draw as well. And so it is worth the time and the effort, in my opinion at least, to at least try to draw it once while you're at it. So here I'm going to be making this petal going down, and since it is a sprawling folded petal, I'm going to be keeping the main shape in mind, going like this. Something like this looks pretty nice. Now let's make another concentric petal like all roses have, with the small fold and the curvature, of course, needs to be there. So we are deleting and redoing a little like this, and giving it this nice foldy petal. Here it is going to be more like this. You can go imaginative with what you do with the petals, because as with everything in nature, it's not or ever going to be perfect really, but what you can have is have fun with it. And it is something that I give great importance to. Having fun in whatever you do, whether it's just drawing a flower, is something that is very important. Because life is very boring if you are not having fun in anything that you are doing. So here we are giving it the final inner petals, and as you can see, the small details that I'm giving, fleshing out the rose in ways that may not have been obvious from the start. And now we have basically inside done. So what we are going to do is we're just going to connect the dots here. And now the outer petals. So this is where you can get even more creative, because these are sprawling petals that are not concentric. This is the outer shell that envelopes the entire thing. And so you can give it some of the petal folds to make it more aesthetic. And yeah, like this. Then I will give it another petal here and give it a sharp inner fold like this, while giving it this center line. You see, we are keeping the main guidelines that I set out and just going with the flow of the flower. And here I'm going to be giving a petal that is going to be like this. the center lines, and the main part of this is now done. So what we are going to do is we are going to give it, so from a perspective wise, a little bit of fleshing out so that it has depth to it when you look at it. And one thing roses have is they have very visible surrounding leaves around the rose itself. So let's give it these leaves that are going to be green, and then let's say these are the wrapper leaves. I would say this is the leaves that protect the rose when it's still not hatched. And now we are going to give it a stem, and now we are going to give it the other part, the young rose stem that's going to be growing right next to it. So let's go with this, and let's give it the angle so that it's going to fit in the frame. So what I'm going to do is, let me move it like this, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first draw an oval. Oval means like an egg. That's exactly what I am going to do. This is an egg shape, mostly. An oval means an egg. And so now we are going to be keeping attention to the anatomy of a rose. So first, we are giving it the spikes. The spikes can be irregular. A fun fact is, wild roses have a lot more spikes. So I assume that the rose that I am drawing is not wild. And the spikes are a little bit more muted around the new rose, but they're still there, like this. Anybody who has raised some flowers like roses know how hard it is to raise them. They constantly get infested with insects of all kinds, and the beauty comes at a cost of not having peace of mind, because your rose can always get infested, but the beauty is worth it. What we are going to do is, the rose itself is tucked inside this little outer shell that opens up to become these down the line. But right now they are still enveloping the rose. The petals have not sprawled yet, and the tips are kind of sticking out. They are kind of pointy of these leaves. The inside you can give, maybe to make prominent that it's a rose, this texture, and then it is time to color this. Coloring this is crucial. First, we are going to be removing some of the guidelines that are disturbing the main continuity of this, so that we don't really have anything too out of line that's distracting. Now that we have the rose going, we are going to give it color. The easiest part is coloring the rose body. So just giving it some green. Now, here it's going to be darker with the barbs. Roses have barbs, and the barbs are of darker colors on the body. They're trying not to get eaten by herbivores, and it is very painful when you have any of these in your hand. That's kind of the point, right? It's trying to make it a bad idea to touch this, because it is not evolved around humans. It's evolved around herbivores that would eat it. And so it wanted to not be eaten and developed this protection mechanism, which is working very well, by the way, and giving a lot of pain to the people also, sadly, who are raising them because they're so nice. Now we are giving the green to the envelope leaves for the petal, for the rose flower. This is going to be nice because you are not actually in need of too much outlining, since this is mostly outlined by its own colors itself. But maybe the center lines a little more. Let's do it like that. And yeah, the colors are going to be giving it the texture. We forgot the color, the small barbs. So that's what I'm going to do. The small barbs are colored too. And now we have the basic outline of the flower's body stem. Now we need to get to the nitty-gritty. So I'm going to be using a color gradient of basically from light yellow, orange, and red. It is very simple as color gradients go. There's no big gradient changes from very drastically different colors. And first I'm going to take out the elephant in the drawing, which is just making the little petal a little orange, since this is going to be a mostly orange petal, a mostly orange rose. Just giving it the orange it deserves. And like that, that part is done. Now we go to this part. And one thing to realize is how many folds this has. It actually determines the darkness of the color. And this is going to be giving us some headache to draw this, because the depth and the 3D effect of the of this is going to be given solely by the color gradients we have. So before I go to this daunting task, I'm going to be giving the main stem some shadowing. A simple shadow. And since we are taking the light source as coming from this side, we are going to be giving it shadows under the rose. So this is going to be looking a little bit more shadowy. And this, let's say, is going to be having a shadow like this. Just some gray horizontal hatching, nothing too special, but it still gives some depth to the drawing itself. And keep in mind to have it in line with the leaf structure, so to say. Leaves sprawl from the center line horizontally to keep it more realistic. And it is looking better, so let's give it this shadow as well. And now let's keep on shadowing this one and this. Let's see, since it's getting light like that, it would probably be wise to cover it like this. And now that we have that out of the way, we can actually mark the pieces that we are going to be covering in shadows. And it is going to be dependent on the structure and on the lighting. So here, for example, I'm going to be giving it a small line. These lines are going to be very numerous, and a small hatching. The hatching is going to stay. I'm just going to color over it. So first we give it the lighting differences to accentuate the petal folds. So let's make this more like this. So it accentuates the petal fold. Something like this here. And let's give it something like this, so that the petal fold is more visible and more prominent. Because the petals are kind of folding from the inside out, they have that aesthetic, nice looking effect that you can use to your advantage to make your drawing more beautiful. Roses don't always have to smell, by the way. I've seen a lot of very beautiful roses that had pretty much no smell, but they still looked very nice. I was very surprised because I was a smaller kid back then when I discovered a rose doesn't really have to smell. It does to attract insects, but it can just be very bright and just coast along with the color itself. So let's keep drawing like that. The directions I kind of give importance to, so I'm fixing this one. The coloring directions kind of gives it depth and gives it a 3D understanding, 3D perspective. So here it's getting a little bit too fuzzy. So what I'm going to do is I am going to strengthen the petal outline a lot by giving it a lot of pressure. You see, this takes a lot more effort than drawing any kind of animal because of the shadowing and the color gradients being so important for it. But it is what it is. Keeping on. At the same time, giving it very thick outlines also makes it possible to have a more dramatic picture in your hand. When you are done drawing this, it's going to look very much more impressive just because of the little tricks and tips that you are using, like the fuzzy sketch effect and the small petal folds and stuff like that. It all adds up to make this drawing, and any drawing really, to stand out much better. So while I'm at it, let's make this more prominent as well, since it's blending in. Something like this. Yeah, it is looking good. So let's go down for the stem and make it fleshed out. Something like this. Yeah. It is looking even better with the extra definition given, with the pressure, I would say. So I'm going to be keeping this action until I have a satisfactory result that gives me a less fuzzy and more defined picture at hand, because there comes a point where you are using the fuzzy sketch technique to make it look more impressive, and it just blends all into fuzz, and then it loses all the impressiveness because it becomes noise. You still have to distinguish and have contrasts and have details that stand out. So you kind of need to give it outlines from time to time, which is done by using different shades of gray, which is done by using different pressures when you are drawing. But the good part is, it is fun. It's relaxing. People do mandala, for example, or coloring books. And this is exactly what it is. It is drawing and then coloring. So it is a similar idea. Can you turn your mind off really when doing this? Not really, I would say. It's not a too good of an idea to just turn your mind off when you are trying to draw something complicated. But it's still so relaxing that you do get to autopilot when you're doing things like making the outlines better. So you see it is looking a lot better with the new stronger outlines. So what I'm going to do is, before I give it the shadow effects, I'm going to be making all the inner outlines also stronger, much stronger. Because the shadow outlines are also gray, and if I don't, then they're going to be blending in, which I do not want. Because a rose is beautiful with its details. And so we need to keep them. Here, important thing to keep in mind is the center line for each petal, because they are leaves. And leaves have the center vascularity line. So basically they get their nutrition from the main center line usually. That's where you find all the bugs. The leaves have the little connection to the stem, and there starts the line, and right at the stem you find all kinds of pests eating your beautiful flowers, which is very annoying, and I dislike pests. One thing that can help a lot is actually having ladybugs. Ladybugs are amazing hunters, especially for aphids, and they live in small shrubs and bushes. And I heard they really like lavender, which is also very hard to keep alive, as far as I know. And if you can manage, you can actually raise your own little population of ladybugs, just so your roses can stay pest-free. So we are keeping in mind the petal structures. That's why I am giving this petal such a careful outline. Here, I'm not sure if I want to keep that. Let's take it out. You see, there's small changes still going on, even when I am just modifying the outlines. That's how drawing and literally anything works. If you are doing a project or something, the initial plan never actually goes through. You always modify it at least 5 times. By the end, the aims usually stay the same, but the project itself changes a lot. And it's natural, it's normal, it's expected. And just like that, we are about to get to the meat and potatoes soon. Now, we have the final petal that is a little tougher to reach, but nothing is impossible, and impossible is nothing, so we keep making the outlines much darker and prominent and even fuzzier. Looks like we are through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be keeping in mind the general direction of the light that we are getting. And so I'm going to be giving it, using this little cheat code that I had, the little petal texture cheat code, and this little line that I gave while I was drawing it. The petal, let's say, shadow lines. So here, shadow line, basically like that, and the shadow is going to be going like this. And the petal inside, for example, here is going to be just shadow. just following the center line sprawl effect, horizontal, from the center line itself, and keeping a very light shadow maybe around here. Something like this, yeah. Then keeping a light shadow to accentuate the centerfold. Again, here. Something like this, yeah. Then let's say, goes something like this. The stems are always a little darker, so the stems of the petals are always a little darker, which means we can give it a gradient shadow like this that follows the outline. That's also another cheat code. So what we should do now is, here is a little petal fold that is being a little blended in. So what we should do is, we should first make this stand out like that, and then here I'm thinking of a solution. Maybe it can be good to give it a gradient shadow like this. Let's see. Not too bad, not too shabby, yeah. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to be giving this a very light shadow around the petal fold, because this is a petal fold and maybe the shadow should be sprawling a little more. Here a little shadow, here a little shadow. Now this is going to be the petal fold itself, so to accentuate this petal folding, I'm going to be giving it a textured shadow. And you see, sometimes you need to use your eraser so that the contrast between your hatches creates depth. Here we assume that the petal is like this, give it some texture. Here we give it an even darker texture, because this is very much inside the petal. So let's go ham on this. Two passes. Let's make this line a lot more stronger. Let's make this line pop a lot more with the extra pressure. Let's make this center line stronger. Something like this, yeah. Looking pretty okay. So here, the last of the inside shadows we are putting down, and soon enough we are going to be coloring. The shadows are very important because it gives the rose effect, I would say. Basically what makes a rose is this that you are seeing here. So this is a petal that is folding inside. This petal needs to be then here a little darker, here a little darker with a stronger line, here should be the darkest because it is all just shadow there. Here maybe the generic shadow that we give, and here some curved gradient shadow. It is looking much better from when it started, and maybe here a very light shadow to accentuate the petal fold again, like this. And now we can actually color this because it looks very nice to color. What we should do is, first we should identify the light areas which are not sketched much, and identify the outlines of each petal. The outlines of each petal I'm going to be giving a light red. What do I mean? I mean this. this is the petal outline, and it's going to be getting some light red. Nothing too deep, but it is going to also make a difference in terms of how it's drawn. So let me just be drawing like this, the petal outlines, something like this is going to help it flesh out a lot better. So it's going to be something like this. Look at the consistency. The line consistency for the petal outline doesn't really have to be too strict, but still, it shouldn't really change too much either. So here, it's going to get a lot easier as long as you do it correctly, because the petals get smaller in each step if you start from the outside. And so, with each one that you successfully finish, you are getting closer to your finish line, which is going to be having a completely finished painting or drawing. I guess this is drawing because painting needs paint, and this is more using sticks, graphite sticks. So I guess this would be a drawing, which is technically still covered under paintings, I believe, but it's its own thing. So continuing like that, maybe making it a little more gradient. So I'm adding a little light outline here for the color gradient. And then moving on to this edge. Always follow the outlines. You are laying them for a reason. See how easy it makes life when you have a plan to whatever you do. Oh, this one is tough. It is inside the tripod, but we find a way, and it is getting okay. Let's give it a little gradient as well. The petal, this can be all red because it is such a petal that is very covered. So here we give this petal the gradient in the shadow, then follow it on the outside. Look at the fold being all red. It is going to receive much more color. It's going to receive oranges and yellows soon. First, this detail should be done though. And here, you can pretty much go all red since it is so inside. You can go a little darker to make it stand out, since it is kind of shadowy, and then go back to the more gentle broad stroke. Adjust as you need. So here I'm going to be using the broader side to first give it the line, then making it stand out. No matter how many times you make the outline stronger, they will still blend in some way. What you are going to be using then to stand it out is the colors. At this point, if you make too much focus on the outline, it's going to drown out the details, and you are going to have a very artificial looking picture. And so, to avoid this, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a very orange color for the entirety of the rest areas, and then for the light parts that are not covered in these shadows, I'm going to be adding yellow. So let's add the orange. I'm giving it some pressure so that the orange pops. Look at how it blends with the red. I like drawing because it gives you peace of mind and because it allows you to actually flesh out everything and anything you have in mind. You can just think of something, grab a pencil, and make it very real. And when you achieve that, it is satisfying because it's exactly the way you want it to be. So here you see the color is actually engulfing the light petal shadow, which is what is intended. The shadow should not stay colorless and fully gray. So here we keep on coloring with the petal fold and the petal sprawl in mind. The petal shape is what gives us the desirable 3D effect, and so we don't want to lose it. Continuing on, we are starting as always with the hard part first, the outlines first, and then slowly moving so that we receive an easier time. We have an easier time when enjoying our art, because it shouldn't feel like a chore. You should enjoy every second of you doing art, and you should be having fun with it. So this part is proving to be hard because it is so far and so under. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my non-dominant left hand, actually. It is non-dominant, but I'm still proficient with it. I can write with my left hand as well as my right hand. Because as a kid, I found it very cool, to be honest, to be able to do that. And it helped me when my right hand was fatigued, when I was tired on my right hand. I could just switch and keep writing during the class notes with my left hand. And so I did. And it stuck, and I believe it is a cool little tidbit, cool little detail about just the video author that you are watching. So here, continuation. And yeah, just coloring and coloring. And you see how the shadows laid out from before are blending in. That is beautiful. That is something that I am very happy about. So let's keep doing this. And then, as a final touch, I'm going to be adding the yellows to make the brighter areas pop. But first, we will be strengthening this little piece so that it has more orange. Okay, it is going pretty nice. Let's continue on. This is also a little bit tiring and tough to get to these spots around the tripod. It is tough to have a drawing video that is also watchable without a lot of my hand in the way, without a lot of shadows in the way, without a lot of anything in the way. And to ensure that, you have to basically keep distance from your drawing, which means holding the pencil from the very base, which is fine, but then you're going to develop a very odd grip that kind of makes your fingers tired faster. But again, oh, there is a weird little lack of shadow there. Let me fix that a little. Tough to get a gradient going when you are fixing it. Okay, looks good. Back to coloring. Now, roses are one of the most sought after fragrances too. A lot of different fragrances, especially for women but also for men, are going to contain roses because the color is so, not the color, the scent is so, let's say, permanent, and it persists a lot, and it is very distinct. Since it is very natural, people are kind of wired to recognize this flower. We know this from all our history. It's always been around, and it's always been liked by people. And so, our noses instantly recognize and say, that's a rose. Which is a big thing when you are buying perfumes. Let's keep this going. Orange, orange, and more orange. You see, as we get more to the inside, we have to press a lot more to get the color out and not drowned out by the darker shades that the shadows bring. It's just how it works. Always keep in mind the direction of the leaf sprawl, or you lose a lot of realism. Here, for example, when you color the shadow, it looks not like too much, but you are basically giving the shadow the change from dark gray to dark orange gray. Doesn't seem like much, but it does change the looks a lot after you do. It adds like window tint on cars. And since people love window tint a lot, I believe it's not pointless to do so, to give tints to darker colored areas. Now here we run into an issue of a very thin outline being completely drowned out. So we just give it a little loving touch. And all is fine in the world. Here too, it's going to be getting very indistinct. So we are going to be giving even darker touches. Like this. Like that. Yeah. So I keep on working. It's getting pretty simple. At this point, the areas are so small. They are done in a few seconds. Look at that. And just like that, we will give it a final few touches. To make sure that we can distinguish every single detail and not have any lost, because we have weak outlines, which has become the bane of my existence with this one, but it's also an easy fix. You just trace over your own lines, so there isn't much thought you have to put there. Yeah, while we are at it, let's add even darker leaf outlines, because I realized that the entire thing would probably be benefiting a lot from it. So let's just do that. The center lines I'm going to leave untouched, just the leaf lines. The petal outlines, especially inside, but outside too at times. The leaf center lines are sometimes also in need, but not always, not too much at least. Just a little fixing touch, I would say. So here it gets tricky again, because it is very in a tough spot to reach with my dominant right hand. And I don't really want to do any fine detail tuning with my non-dominant left hand. I can use it, but it is weaker in the fine motor control aspect. I can use both hands, but I still have a dominant one, and so I'm going to be respecting the choices of my body and letting it do things it is comfortable with, including using the hand it wants to use. I'm actually very proud of this drawing. I like it a lot. It looks very nice. It has been very time consuming, but I don't see it as consumed time. I see it as invested time in visual appreciation. And so there's a difference. It is not a waste or a spent. It is something I value personally. And yeah, this looks pretty okay. Now let's add the yellows. So the yellows are going to be in the uncolored parts. Very light, but still. The uncolored parts, by that I mean the parts that were not shadowed. So here I'm adding the yellows, and we are going to be doing this for a small area, because the outer petal outlines don't really need that. So it is going to be basically outlines around the shadows. Like this. Now here, since this shadow is very faint, I'm going to be giving this a bit yellow as well. Then here, I'm going to be giving this a mighty yellow outline, because this has a lot of surface area that can be yellowed. Here too, not too shabby, not too bad. Here is just going ham with it. Here as well, here a little, here a little. The more I go inside, the less I'm going to have opportunities to do this, so I'm just going to be giving some yellows in areas I see fit, but not all. So let's give yellows to here. It's going to be important. And here, let's give some yellow petal outline. Let me see how it is looking. I believe it looks pretty okay. And so, if you like my videos, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video, and stay tuned for more commentary, art, drawing, tutorial, how-to videos.